Hey, everybody. Welcome to the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast. Hey, what we do on this podcast is talk about what B2B sales and marketing leaders, operators, and experts are doing today to really break through and grow their businesses at exponential levels. Let's get it in the interview. At the end, I'll give you an update on my courses, and you can check out my website at b2brevenue.com, and it's Brian G. Burns on LinkedIn.
Hey, Daniel and Chris, welcome to the show. Why don't we start with Daniel? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting us. So I have got 25 years experience in business to business and business to consumer marketing and sales, and have been working in consultancy and in-house for global telecoms, media and technology companies. And a couple of years ago, Chris and I were both asked to speak at a customer centricity conference in London, where we both had a shared passion of customer and kept in touch. And then we had the idea for the book about sort of a year and a half ago.
Cool. How about you, Chris?
Yeah. So I'm co-author of The Customer Catalyst with Daniel. I've been working in technology, fintech for the last 20 years, marketing, customer engagement, business development, all those areas. We really feel that the whole dynamic has shifted. We're in the customer economy, and we think that's really affecting the way that salespeople now sell.
Yeah. And what was the impetus for the book?
Go on, you go.
we thought we had this nailed, right? But yeah, I mean, there's so many things, right? We're in a world where people expect effortless customer experiences. They expect the Amazon way of dealing with a client, with a vendor in everything they do. And in B2B, and let's take software, for example, customers are becoming more and more like consumers in the way they expect a company to operate with them. And that's making it harder and harder in many ways for salespeople to sell, because if the customer's not happy, you could argue no matter how good the salesperson is, they're probably not going to be that happy about buying more stuff from that particular vendor. So that was really the impetus of the book. It's really how, the customer is changing the dynamics of selling.
Yeah.
And I think adding to that, we've really seen over the last 10 years, the power has fundamentally shifted from organizations to the customer, where it was the product economy, and now we're firmly in the customer economy. So, if you take 10 years ago, pre-social media, pre-internet, the customer would be forced to basically take what the organization had to sell. And they didn't, the customer didn't have that power, and that's very much changed. And I think, a couple of things to sort of add to that. Last year, there's a really interesting point where there's a US roundtable of organizations, very powerful organizations like JP Morgan, Apple. And at that conference that they had last year, they said that they were going to change their main objective as organizations, whether it was no longer purely about short-term sales and shareholder value, and that their purpose needed to be invested in employees, and looking at how they delivered value to the customer. So we thought, actually, for organizations like that to be waking up to the fact that the economy has changed, we thought that actually was quite a pivotal moment, and so we felt there's a real gap in the market for a book to appeal to leaders and the whole organization in terms of how they can better serve customers, which obviously has a direct impact on sales.
And what should companies be doing?
Well, there's a number of factors there. So firstly, it's about an obsession with the customer right from the very top. Yeah. Brian, in some of your webcasts, you talk about salespeople complaining to their boss about customer success, and they're not really that focused on actually successful. What did you call them? Customer distress, for example.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant. It's like salespeople want life easy, right? To a certain degree, they want to be able to go in, the customer's happy. This is what we do. There you go. Boom. In reality, they face obstacle after obstacle after obstacle. Right. And the reason that is because they're in the customer economy, right? So what we're giving the CEO and the exec team is the toolkit to help the whole company really orientate properly around the client. And therefore, the job of selling becomes easier because you don't have to battle against all the headwinds that you're trying to get through in order to close the deal. And the reality is salespeople are driven by quarters still, right? I mean, I know it's changing, but why can't salespeople why couldn't salespeople have a bigger runway? 12 months, 24 months, right? Isn't there a way that salespeople could be operated or, motivated, incentivized in a different way? I mean, we'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, Brian.
Well, because I did mostly startups, and the challenge was at home office, I always called it the bunker because nothing could penetrate it. So they would act like in the World War II where they were moving like the little pieces on the board. Their hypothesis of what the market was very different than what the market was.
Absolutely, you see that all the time. And here's another stat as well. We understood that. In our book, we talk about the fact that last year there's a stat that only 30% of salespeople made their target. I don't know what your latest stats on that is, but it's not 100%, right? It's a numbers game.
Well, I've had an expert on about compensation, and they target 60%, which means they're purposely building it not to be made. Meaning that if it was 100%, then all the resources of the company would be allocated. So they're only allocating, 60% of the resources there, and they're trying to cover themselves. And then they blame the rep for not making the quota.
Exactly.
Right?
It's a tough life.
Yeah. But I mean, this mentality, this paradigm shift that has to take place, do you think it's possible that people are going to open their eyes and really start thinking like the customer?
I think it's it's the end of sales as we know it, right? It really is. What I see, and Daniel and I've both been in this world, that salespeople come and go from companies probably every 24 months or maybe 36 months. The turnover is so high and it ain't getting any slower. And that's because the demands are getting greater and greater. They're having to work harder and harder, and in the end, it's like this is no matter how good the salesperson is, if the odds are stacked against them, they're just going to move on.
Right.
And I think that's a shame. I think salespeople actually want to be in their jobs for longer than 24 months.
Yeah, that's starting over takes a long time.
And I think adding to that, this whole siloed approach where sales is the only custodian of the customer is just so outdated. I mean, what we found in the book is that those silos are breaking down, and the organizations that are genuinely customer-led in a much more sustainable way are the ones that where all those traditional functions of HR, sales, marketing have blurred. So there's a really interesting example of the London Clearing House, which is part of the London Stock Exchange. So, you'd imagine it's a very conservative organization, very rigid silos, but because of the financial crisis and the deregulation, they really had to be very agile to succeed. So they have blurred the boundaries about 5 different roles within the business from marketing, sales, and they basically map sort of 5 different contacts for their clients, and that's working phenomenally well, and they've had phenomenal growth within that. And that is a really good example of the way those boundaries have changed. I mean, we in the book, we actually liken what organizations have been, where there's this whole fear about sales within the organization. So we liken it to the Wizard of Oz, where the wizard represents sales and everybody else in the organization is just in fear, thinking that there's some superhuman being. And that has got to change to be able to drive growth so that everybody is empowered to serve the customer. And it sounds very idealistic, but it's the ones like your Zoom that we're actually using today who have done amazingly well. So Eric Wan, who CEO of Zoom, he has got this whole culture that everyone is responsible for the customer. They make dynamic changes in the whole experience in terms of the product, and everyone is responsible for that. And I think it's no accident that he's got this 99% rating on Glassdoor as the most rated CEO and employee experience. So that is the sort of debate we're trying to get going, is that people need to change.
And it has to come from the top. Is that
Absolutely.
true?
Yeah. Absolutely. It's not a bottom-up approach. You've got to do both. You've got to have it infused in the culture and the CEO. Otherwise, you're just pushing uphill all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, what we're also seeing is at board level, the really smart boards get the fact that you can't just measure performance based on quarters. You've got to play the long game. And the salespeople that really seem to enjoy their jobs are those that work for companies whose CEOs and boards get that. And you know, we're seeing that more and more. What do you think, Brian? Have you seen similar things? Or
yeah, I mean, bottom up doesn't work. I think when you have that maniacal leader focused on that customer, and anything that gets in the way gets bulldozed out, right? Just gets snowplowed to the side. No, this matters. And it is a cultural thing, much more than a functional thing. It's got to be that belief. I mean, I just had a conversation with a restaurant owner, own a multiple chain, and they did this division of labor gone mad. You know, one person would take the order, one person would make the product, the next 3 different people would come over and tell us about the specials. And I was just like, dude, it's a process thing. It's not a people thing. Your process is too much division of labor.
That's a really good analogy, right? So if you look at the head of Vista Equity Partners, who owns 30-odd software companies, you know him, Robert Smith. Yeah. He has said many occasions, and we've talked about this, that the future of the company organization is not driven by silos. It's driven by the journey that the customer takes with the company.
Yes.
That is transformative, and we're starting to see it already. The companies like Slack, they've merged services and support together in one customer function, post-sales customer function. Yeah. And I think that's the shape of things to come. We talk a lot about that you can't build a business based on everyone's silo activities, or else you're dead.
Right.
That's not how Amazon operate, is it? You don't care. You don't even talk to people at Amazon. It's still a great experience.
It is, and I've got friends that work there, and the maniacal focus on the customer above everything else, and the long-term view. Nobody feels vulnerable about their KPIs. They feel vulnerable about the customer experience.
Exactly. And actually, I mean, linking into that about the cultural side, in the book, in the culture chapter of the book, we've got a whole section on Horst Schulze, the CEO of the Ritz-Carlton Group. So, amazing, maniacal passion for the customer. And what he did was, really empower every single employee in the organization to be responsible for the customer, where he had this credo, this whole mission about ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Yes. And where they had $2,000 that any employee could do in terms of serving the customer. If he felt there was an obstacle in the way for the guest experience, they would just get on and do it without having to go through like 10 levels of approval, which I think, that was a long time ago, but it's still an amazing organization and has achieved real sustainable growth because of that whole cultural, and empowerment.
And I think the enterprise has taken a pendulum swing where they're looking at their dashboard instead of listening to their customers.
Oh, it's unbelievable. The amount of people employed in sales ops analyzing data in a myriad of different ways about opportunities and, is this going to, do you think the ratio is like 20%, 30%? What a load of rubbish. Honestly.
Right. It's a game that's being gamed.
It's just absolute rubbish. Get rid of all that. You could, honestly, waste of time and money. It's never going to help anyone. At the end of the day, the customer wants value. And you talk about this all the time in your webcasts, right? The funny thing is, there's such an inherent desire by really good salespeople to build relationships and satisfy the customer. It's part of the DNA of a really good salesperson. Yeah. They want to do the right thing. And so getting beaten up all the time from management about quarterly numbers and pipeline is not going to help drive the business forward.
Right. Yeah. So, because, typically when I'm selling or working with an entrepreneur, they want to know, well, how do I win more deals? It's like you have to give more during the process. You can't just pitch and propose.
Right.
It's too big of a leap to go from concept to I'm going to change my business. You've got to help them baby step through that and demonstrate the value that you bring. And they go, well, that's expensive. Well, so's losing.
Right? Yeah, very true.
So's not getting a deal.
Yeah. So what do you want? You know, do
Right.
you want to play the game short term, or do you want to play a medium term game? Do you
Yeah.
want to really grow the business sustainably, or just
Right.
make a few pot shots every quarter?
Yeah. The biggest deal in my career, I won because I lived there for 3 months during the summer, integrating our product with another product so that they would work seamlessly together. My company wouldn't do it. The customer wouldn't do it. So if I didn't do it, it wouldn't get done. So I did it by hand. And you get a $30 million deal. That never would have happened otherwise. No one's going to believe that, yes, we can. They're like, yeah, sure you can, but maybe we'll look at it next year, or we'll try something else, or get back to us in 3 months.
So do you think it's the job of salespeople to be the ultimate customer ambassador in the organization?
Well,
Brian? What's your view? Or is it a collective effort across the function?
I think it's got to be a collective effort, but it is a cultural thing. It's a belief system. The Ritz-Carlton thing is a perfect example, because I was at a resort one time and we needed additional towels. So I just called up, and the person I was with looked out the window. Are they here already? And the person who brought them was out of breath. She ran so
Right? What an amazing experience.
You're like, oh, it's okay. Take your time with it. These aren't emergency towels. They're just towels.
Quick, get the lifeboats.
Right. But that belief system that my job is to get them what they want instead of, I'll get to it. And I think in today, the silos between marketing and sales and support, engineering and sales. It's like, well, sell what we have. And it's like, okay, well, that market's smaller than this market. And you need that maniacal leader to really decide to decide what market we're going after, and to get everybody on the same page, not just everybody doing what they want to do.
Yeah, I'm just building on that. You asked us what's in our book. So again, we're not here to plug a book. We're here to plug an idea, a new way of doing things. And, we believe that if you bring together all these different concepts around focusing the business on the customer, from listening to the client in different ways, it's not just about NPS surveys, most of which don't tell you anything, by the way. It's not just, it's about listening. It's about really understanding what they're saying and acting on it. It's about the culture, as we talked about with Horst Schulze, and it's about customer experience, journey mapping, understand the process they go through across the silos, customer success, advocacy, customer health scores, so using all the data properly so you really understand what's going on, right? Co-creation with a client, which is what you just talked about, then becoming advocates ultimately for your business, because actually the advocates are your new sales force in terms of easing that process of salespeople actually closing deals. So we brought all that together. We call it the Sea Change Growth Engine. And we think this book is actually going to help the business understand how to orientate themselves around the client. We're really excited about it. We think it's a great tool for leaders. And as Daniel was saying, we've got some fantastic case studies in there, which we think are actually going to be kind of eye-opening for everyone in sales and in all different departments. So, yeah, it's great we've had the chance to talk about it.
And so it's really trying to have product market fit where it's really company market fit.
Yeah, it's not about pushing the product. The product economy is over.
Yeah.
The customers are buying experiences now. It doesn't matter what business you're in. Every industry is digitized. You cannot sell a product anymore on its own. You never sell a product. That's gone, right? You've got to sell the experience, the package, the services, the whole aftercare bit. You've got to sell everything. The customer doesn't just want to buy something for it to break, especially in the subscription model where they have to renew it 12 months later and all, right? It's all those things. So, yeah, absolutely.
And I think adding to that, I think being really radical, it is the death of the salesman as we know it. So
easy.
That's silent. But I add that very carefully with there's a new metamorphosis of that salesperson, where it's far more exciting to work across the whole organization to go back to what marketing was meant to be, is all about meeting the need of the customer. Yeah. So rather than what you think they need. So actually for sales to be leading that charge across marketing, across HR, to get the right skills to serve that customer, that is a really exciting point that we're at. Whereas Chris was mentioning, the technology is there where you can literally listen to your customer at every step of their journey, and you can act dynamically to serve them better. I mean, like, what a better opportunity for a salesperson to be leading that, rather than being stuck in a rigid straitjacket, that they're only allowed to do certain things, only allowed to serve certain things to the customer. So that's what we're really excited about, that what's possible now, where the whole organization can much better dynamically serve the customer.
Now, when you go into your clients, what's the common misinterpretations of this?
What I see in my current job today is that they don't care about silos. They just don't care. They're like, well, why am I talking to this person? This is a new person that's just come up. I've never heard of this person. Who are these people on this call? Which department? They just don't care. So the biggest problem now is, especially in complex B2B environments, is ensuring that the customer sees that there's a joined up effort across those different silos. So it could be sales that provide that facilitated approach, and some really good salespeople are really good at that, right? The customer success people would argue it's them, but there is an element of, are they the right people to have the right exec relationships? There's all that in there as well. The bottom line is, we have to provide a common united front with the customer. It's really hard, but that's how companies are going to grow in a customer economy. It's not by pushing a product and for it not to work 12 months later.
Yeah. And also, it's adding to what Chris was saying, it's about reskilling the whole organization. So from CEOs who 10 years ago thought that they could, do their sales kickoff once a year, and they do their quarterly employee webcast and their quarterly reports to the markets, and then not communicate and not have anything to do with the customer. Those days are over. We found that actually in Europe, the 57% of CEOs of the top 250 companies are from finance backgrounds, and a lot of those people have limited experience of the customer. And going forward, particularly as you've got what Alan Joper, the CEO of Unilever, now calls the Gen Zennials, so Generation Z and the Millennials, who will be the new customer decision makers and the new salespeople, they don't want to work for organizations like that purely give, say, customer centricity lip service. They want the transparency of data and information that we now have means that they may start to go to a company like that says that they are customer centric, but they will soon find out from your Glassdoors, your reviews, that an organization isn't like that, and they just won't work for them. So you're at a pivot now where organizations have got to change. And actually, I think HR has really got to step up to the mark in terms of reskilling the organization, instead of just, for example, the original point where we were saying at the beginning of our discussion was that, salespeople are then shunted out after 18, 24 months. HR has got to push back in terms of the skilling of sales and what the skills are needed for customers nowadays, which I think is a very interesting discussion.
Cool. And what will people get out of the book if they invest the time and money into reading it?
Look at the toolkit to help them be more successful, to help their business become a real leader in the customer economy, to equip the leadership with the right methods and techniques, and learn the best case studies out there around reorienting the business around the client. It gives it's a talking point for sales, to have a chat with the boss and say, look, really, we're in the customer economy. You're hammering me here, obviously very politely, you're hammering me on numbers, but the customer's not going to buy, they're not happy. And if we don't get it right with this customer, they're not going to recommend us. And by the way, we'll be cut out that market. So, salespeople are constantly trying to give evidence as to why they're making decisions in the way that they're doing it, and why it is quite hard sometimes to close a deal, because the reality is the customer's not ready for it. So they just make it up. They just put stuff in Salesforce that isn't true, don't they?
Yeah, and everybody's working off of it. And
yeah, and
but
then it's
yet
like
everybody kind of knows it too. So everyone's kind of playing this game.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just. And you know what's really one of the things I've loved observing in my career, and Daniel and I both have similar stories, is that you start the quarter, the laid back Californian sales leaders on the phone. Hey guys, you all down the pub yet? And he's shouting at the guys in London. And basically, he's really nice at the start of the quarter. By the end of the quarter, he's going nuts. I want you to get in there. I want you to close the deal. All this stuff, and it's just maniacal. It's just bonkers. And every quarter it's the same.
I used to call it the quarterly roller coaster. The first month is meetings and vacations and people having babies. Second month, people start warming up, getting to work. Third month, it's panic.
Right.
Yeah.
And then it just starts over every time.
Exactly. But at the same time, then people are analysing reports and producing more numbers that are inflated, and you prodded it and there's nothing there, or there's not very much there. The business isn't actually growing. Right. The business isn't growing because they're not orienting around the right customer. Things. Right. That's what we're saying. This is how to, if you like, do the right things. And when we said the end of sales, it's as we know it. It's not like salespeople are going to go away. We love salespeople, but the whole process of selling has to change in the customer economy. It's the end of sales as we know it, right?
Yeah.
Cool. And I would say, just adding to that, in terms of, it wasn't just about a book, because we know people are very time poor. For us, success will be in 2 years' time, if, excuse the pun, but if the customer catalyst is the catalyst to get leaders and the whole organization thinking differently about how to center the whole organization around the customer. And what we were really passionate about doing it is with the C change. So very simply, C representing the customer and the power the customer has. There are 10 elements, the 10 C change growth drivers, but what we'd found is that there were a lot of books that were very academic that say if you go through steps A to B, miraculously you'll have transformed. We all know that doesn't happen in practice, and because Chris and I have both been customer transformation practitioners for the last 25 years, we wanted to provide a practical guide where it may be one organization in manufacturing might start at culture but end on customer success, whereas a company in publishing might start at customer voice. So what we're saying is it's a framework, but it's a practical framework that will really help you do your job better and be more rewarded and ultimately drive growth, because that's what we're here to do.
Yeah. Cool. And where can people go to learn more about you, your book, and your work?
Customercatalyst.com. Great. Yeah, with the. We couldn't get customercatalyst.com. It wasn't available. The customer catalyst. It's on Amazon, all good bookstores, but we're happy to chat about it. And, we've sold a ton of, over 1,000 copies already, and speaking at various events and so on. So, we want this to be fun. We want people to have a talking point, to think about it. And, maybe it will help them in their conversations with their sales leaders and so on. Maybe the business leaders will hopefully really take this on board as well.
Yeah.
And by the way, we'd love to hear your view, Brian, as well. What's your view on all this topic? Does it make sense?
Yeah, it's been a passion of mine since early in my career, because when you go into a startup, product market fit isn't really there yet, and what the customer wants, and usually it's a lot of work for you to do it, for someone to do it, and the company doesn't want to do it, the customer doesn't want to do it, and you have this kind of deadlock. So either the sales team figures out some way of doing it, or convincing one or two or both people to do it. And I think you're right on.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Salespeople they end up having to invent it, don't they, to drive the business forward. Right. And they don't always have the right support they need to make it happen.
Not at all.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that interview. Hey, I want to make sure you're checking out b2brevenue.com. That is where you can get a free copy of an ebook that I did. It's a real ebook. It's not a fluff book. It shows and talks about how companies make buying decisions and how you can influence that from both a marketing and a sales standpoint, how to find all the people that are in the decision path, and what they need to see, know, and touch and feel before they make a product selection. If your team needs some coaching, some help, some training, some systems, some processes that do work today, because we know what doesn't work, or you know what doesn't work, I'll show you what does work and how to connect and get into pretty much any account. It includes deal coaching and content, community, and I can customize it for your particular company. Just go to b2brevenue.com, look under training, schedule a call with me. We can talk it over, or just sign up. You can pay per month or all at once, whichever makes most sense for your budget. Also, I put out videos pretty much daily on LinkedIn and on YouTube. On LinkedIn, it's Brian G. Burns, and on YouTube, it's Brian Burns Sales. Just search for that if you like to consume some video content. And if you see me on LinkedIn, please put a comment and a share and a like on some of the videos. I really appreciate it. I've got a company page for each podcast. This one, the B2B Revenue Leadership Podcast, where I put both content and humor videos out daily. And tell a friend about the podcast. Really appreciate you listening. Check out the show notes for all the partners and the connections you can make there, the coupon codes for the products to evaluate them, see if they're a right match for you. And we'll see you next time.